Games Workshop's Warhammer terrain kits suck. They do not make good terrain, and I'm gonna tell you why. I'm Adam Haig, and this is 3D Games. I have major issues with Games Workshop terrain kits, and here's why. They're too uniform. Due to production limitations and attempts at modularity, I guess they can't have that much variation. Now that leads to too much repetition. Whether it's buildings, ruins, or natural structures, you end up with terrain that looks strangely similar. Now I will admit they have some pretty amazing looking details. Unfortunately, that detail comes with a cost. If you are wanting to incorporate some of your own scratch-built terrain, then those details can create inconsistencies on your board. So if you want to have an entire game board with truly cohesive terrain, you're going to have to buy multiple kits. And this, of course, brings me to my next major issue, and that is cost. To make something like this with official Games Workshop kits, it's going to cost you a small fortune. Now I'm sure some of you are probably thinking, but they make amazing looking terrain kits. How about those awesome Osgiliath kits you used? And well, that's a good point. There is one kit, however, that I truly despise, and that is Goblin Town. I've been working on this Goblin Town board on and off for several years, using a variety of materials, and I've tried to incorporate the plastic kits. Unfortunately, the perfectionist in me finds the different aesthetic of the plastic compared with my scratch-built terrain is really jarring. It's just so damn flat and perfect looking. Now here is my issue. You have these ones that were scratch-built using popsicle sticks and balsa wood, then here are the official pieces. The difference in detail is really noticeable, even down to the exaggerated wood grain texture. You can see here that the planks are really tightly packed, with no gaps, and then the stuff I've made is quite gappy. And here you can see that they have these straight edges and it just looks like a rectangular block. They're just too uniform. As you can see, the Goblin terrain is very rickety and uneven. They clearly have not used a tape measure. So what am I going to do? I'm going to break the plastic parts off my Goblin Town terrain. This feels criminal. It has to be done for the greater good. Oops. Yeah, I snipped it. That's fine. I mean, it's alright. These probably would have taken, I don't know, several hours to make, and now it's taking me 30 seconds to destroy. It's fine, because I'll build them back better. Now I'm sure some of you are probably wondering, okay, well, what are you going to do with them then? Surely make some more terrain.
No. Perhaps not. I've thought of a better use for you.
I have a plan, and here it is. Goblin Town minions. And although they've been painted alright, those bases, well, they look kind of boring. So I'm going to jazz them up with some plastic Goblin Town goodness. Now that I've effectively destroyed 3 of my Goblin Town pieces, I'd better make their sacrifice worthwhile. I start by mapping out which parts of the plastic kits I will cut by tracing around 25mm bases with a Sharpie. When doing this, I try to focus on the interesting detailed areas of bones and detritus, which will add character to the bases. Okay, so I have 38 25mm circles to cut out of plastic. I'm not going to bother with the hobby knife, I'm going to use the Dremel. This is where having a Dremel really comes into its own. Using the cutting disc accessory makes light work of this. They're designed to cut metal, so I have no trouble cutting through plastic. I don't bother to follow the guides with any precision and just roughly cut out each segment. The problem with using a Dremel is you do end up with a lot of mess. Little bits of semi-melted plastic fly out everywhere, and you should definitely wear something to protect your eyes. Okay, so amongst the mess, here we have 24 rough cut pieces, which I will need to tidy up, that can just plonk onto the base. But I'm going to have to do a bit of work because, I mean, that's just going to look horrific, isn't it? The whole point is they're supposed to look rickety like the edges of broken broken timber. So this is where the tedious part of the process begins. I'm just going to clean all this up and then we'll get into it. The bottoms of the pieces have cross beams which I carefully shave off with my craft knife. I did this to avoid adding too much height to my little gobbos. It also makes the next step easier because of the reduced thickness. Now comes the fiddly part. Using a sharp hobby knife, I carefully carve away at the edges of the cuts. When doing this, I focus on following the lines of the planks and trying to emulate the look of broken timber at the edges. I leave some planks to overhang off the edges of the bases and cut others to look as if they've snapped off further in. This is to break up the obvious circular shape of the bases and will make them look more immersive. In terms of gameplay, they should still work because of the regular base sitting underneath the added plastic. I had a total of 38 to complete, so this took a long time to finish. It's definitely well worth the effort, as you'll see with the end result. Once I was done, I still had a 40mm base to do for the Goblin King, and something a bit special for the little captain. Okay, so I've completed all the 25mm bases, and now I need to work on this big boy here, the Goblin King himself, on a 40mm base. For the Goblin King himself, I went through the same steps with the larger 40mm base size. I wanted to add a little extra detail, and so added one of the posts with a skeleton on it. So the last base that I need to make is for the tiny little Goblin Captain. Now this little mini cracks me up. Look at the size of this little guy. Now, how's he supposed to boss these bigger minions around? That's what I want to know. In a society where the goblins, they're not exactly egalitarian. So I think I need to do something special with this little dude to give him a bit of height and presence on the battlefield. So I printed a little resin barrel to give his platform some height. I carved the platform the same as the other bases and added a little post. To fix the bases in place, I used super glue for a fast setting and strong finish. I just had to stick with it for a little while, and it really didn't take too long. To paint them, I started by priming them with brown. Using blue tack to stick the bases to some kind of handle makes this a lot easier to get at all the different angles. I then dry brush all over the wood areas with Gawthor brown. This is where that exaggerated wood grain texture is great, because it's just so easy to paint. Next I use Baneblade brown and focus more towards the outer areas of the planks. Finally, I add a very light dry brush of Carrick stone, focusing mostly on the edges. With the wooden areas basically finished, it's time to work on those details. The bones were all painted with a base of Carrick stone. This is then followed with highlights of bleached bone. The detail in these little bones and skulls are really worth the effort of painting and are going to look great beneath those nasty little goblin feet. The bits of torn and ragged cloth I base with corn red. This colour really suits the grim tone and adds a nice contrast to the browns. I apply Mephiston red next as a broad highlight, picking out the raised folds of cloth. Then a fine highlight of Evil Sun's scarlet, focusing on the top of the raised sections. The lashings of cord holding the bones and skeletons in place are painted with Eshin Grey, followed by highlights of Dawnstone Grey. The metal bands on the barrel are painted with Scrag Brown. I apply this in a patchy, messy way to emulate the look of rusty metal. I give all the wooden areas a wash of the Army Painter's Strong Tone wash, which is thinned with a little water. This provides a bit more depth to the timber. It's tiring work painting so many bases, and lucky for me, my wonderful wife occasionally brings me a little pick-me-up.
Hey babe, just
Hello.
a little something.
Oh,
You know, your fave.
Let's go.
Your fave.
Jalapeno poppers.
Enjoy it.
Thank you, darling. Now's the exciting prospect of removing each of the goblins from their original and boring bases. With this one, I unsuccessfully tried to carefully cut it away from the slaughter base with a scalpel and ended up breaking the base. I actually found it was easier to push the goblins up out of the base from the bottom using my mold line scraper. To pin the minis, I drill a small hole into one leg of each goblin and super glue a paper clip in place. This is really fiddly with the smaller gobbos because you can only drill a small way into the bottom of their foot. I then drill each base before applying super glue and inserting the pin. This does take a while to do, but provides much more strength to the join than simply gluing them on without a pin. As always, I want to express my heartfelt thanks to all of my amazing patrons who continue to support this channel. You help keep it afloat and I truly appreciate it. If you're interested in joining the 3D Games family, then please check out my Patreon link in the description. If you enjoy this content, then please like and subscribe and hit the bell and share with your friends. Let me know what you think about official plastic versus scratch-built terrain in the comments, and whether you think I've made the right choice turning Goblin Town into bases. When purchasing your hobby supplies, please consider using my affiliate links listed in the description. This will send a little cash my way and helps pay for jalapeno poppers. Thanks again for all your continued support. Okay, now that I've finished detaching the goblins to their fancy new bases, I can make a sweet little before and after transition. I'm well pleased with how these guys turned out. It never fails to amaze me how a quality base can really elevate the overall look of a mini, and now I can feel proud to display these guys on the top shelf of my display cabinet. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you here next time on 3D Games. Until then, good hobbing everyone.